This video will introduce some concepts related to inventory management. For a start, inventory it's a physical resource that a firm holds in stock with the intent of selling it or transforming it into a more valuable state. Now, all that means is, generally speaking, an inventory is a physical stock of a resource. It could be a physical stock of finished goods ready to go to the customers, or it could be raw materials that the company is going to transform into the finished good, or it could be work in progress, raw materials that has some work done on them, but not finished, but ready to go into the last stage, perhaps of production, and eventually go to the customer. So an inventory is a physical resource. It's a stock of those physical resources, either raw materials, work in progress, or finished products. An inventory system is a set of policies and controls that monitors levels of inventory and determines what levels should be maintained, when stock should be replenished, and how large orders should be. So an inventory system relates to the policies that are going to be applied in managing inventories. So how much or how many items should be stored in the stores, how many items should be kept in reserve, what amount of raw material is required, what are the levels of stock that are required for raw materials, for work in progress, for finished items. And what determines those levels, and are they realistic? And it should also determine when stocks should be replenished and how large the orders should be. So the inventory system looks at how the inventory is managed. Now, types of inventory. Well, raw materials and components, very simply. Work in progress, as I suggested, that's work that's not been completed, but it's partially completed, ready to go perhaps to the last stage of production to become the completed product. And then we have the finished goods, which are ready to go to the customer. There may be a stock of those held in the stores to meet a peak in demand, a sudden unexpected peak in demand. In that case, the company has a stock of finished goods ready to meet that. Of course, there are downsides in holding all of these, the cost of holding them, for example, and this is dealt with in other videos on inventories, which you should look up and make sure you're familiar with. There's also distribution inventory, how to package the items and how to get it ready for delivery, and all of the boxes and tapes and labels and all that's required for distribution. There's also supplies of maintenance, repair and operating items. These are items that are required for the business to continue to function. So, for example, machinery would need oil, and there should be a stock of oil in the stores available. But also there should be perhaps a stock of tools which are necessary for the repair of machinery or equipment. These items, these various miscellaneous items, come under the heading of MRO, maintenance, repair and operating. Now let's look at how orders come about and the effects on the on supplies and on inventory. Now I'm going to go through various slides here. This is actually quite fast. We're on slide 10 at the moment, and we're going out of 27. We're going to go through these fairly fast because they're very simple to follow. It's a very easy class. We start with customers, and the customers generate an order, which is a customer order. The customers want a particular product, so they create a customer order. They require that product. and this customer order will be placed with the retailer. In other words, the customers go to the retailer and ask to buy a certain product. Now the retailer will sell that product to them, but then will wish to replenish his or her stock to make sure that the shop does not run out of this particular product. I'm just using this as an example. It could be a shop or a warehouse or wherever the customers go. The point is, the customers generate an order, the order is with the retailer, and the retailer now wishes to replenish its stock because it's sold some, it wants to replenish that stock. So the retailer will go to the distributor from whom the retailer had bought the product in the first place, and the retailer will replenish the retailer's stock. The distributor will replace the retailer's stock, but the distributor will now have a replenishment order as well. The distributor wishes to replace what's been given to the retailer. So the distributor may go to the wholesaler. The wholesaler is perhaps the one who buys from the company, who will have a large stock of these. So the wholesaler will supply the distributor, who will supply the retailer, who will supply the customer. But the wholesaler will also have a replenishment order because the wholesaler has now given part of its stock to the distributor. So the wholesaler will go to the factory and require more product from the factory. So the wholesaler will place an order with the factory to make more of these items. So we can see how the customers are linked to the factory through these various outlets. Now, with the factory, there is going to be a production delay. The factory has to tool up to make the order. They'll have to have it has to be scheduled. The production schedule will have to be amended to make sure this item is entered on the schedule and ready for production. And the idea is that the production delay will somehow feed into the wholesaler inventory. The wholesaler's inventory may be running down while this production delay is taking place. The wholesaler will have to carry enough of the item to meet the requirements of the distributors of the item. And whilst the wholesaler is running down the stock, the factory should be tooling up to make more of the item. So that's a delay in the system, the production delay. But there's also a shopping delay. The distributor needs to inform the wholesaler, but the distributor will only know when the distributor receives an order from the retailers. And that's not instantaneous either. So there is a delay between the distributor and the wholesaler. There's also a delay between the retailer and the distributor. The retailer just doesn't sell some items to the customer and immediately place the order with the distributor. The retailer will start to run down the supplies in the shop. When the supplies in the shop reach a critical level, at that stage the distributor will receive an order. So there is a shopping delay as well, which needs to be taken into account. So we can see that there's a production delay. The factory needs to tool up, get ready to produce this item. That's a delay. And then there's a shopping delay between the wholesalers, the distributors, and also between the retailers and the distributors. So there's a retailer runs down the inventory, then there's a delay because the retailer is running down the inventory. That delay will eventually mean an order has to be placed with the distributor. The distributor will run down the inventory that the distributor is holding, and eventually the distributor will place an order with the wholesaler, who will run down the stock that the wholesaler is holding, and eventually place an order with the factory, and the factory will have to tool up to make the item. So there are various delays in the system. This is not an instantaneous process. With the retailer inventory, the item is withdrawn from the retailer inventory. So the customers receive the product, but the product has travelled a long way. It's gone round quite a long circuit. The customers place the order with the retailer may supply it out of stock. Then the retailer will need to replenish stocks once they run down to a certain level. So to place an order with the distributor will supply the retailer out of stocks, but then eventually the retailer will have to place an order with the wholesaler, who will supply the distributor out of stock, but eventually the wholesaler will have to place an order with the factory. The factory will need to tool up and start to make it. That's a delay. And of course there has also been delays between the retailer, the distributor and the wholesaler, because each of them held stock. But eventually the customers will get it. Now this can apply to small items, but it can also apply to a big item. Let's say a car. A car is quite an expensive item. The customer places an order with the car retailer to buy a particular car. Now the retailer may not have the car in stock, so the retailer may have to go to the distributor, and the distributor in fact may not have the car, but the distributor will go to the wholesaler or the equivalent in the car industry, who may not have that particular car. So the wholesaler will place an order with the factory, and the factory may want to make that particular car, maybe out of stock, so to start to produce it. There's a delay, and there are various delays in the system, but eventually the customer will receive the car. The item is withdrawn from inventory and given to the customer to satisfy the customer order. So we could see it's a circular arrangement, but it's quite complex, and each part of this is satisfying a particular requirement in the supply chain. The retailer, who has contact with the customer, the distributor, who has contact with the retailer and with the wholesaler who has contact with the factory and the distributor, and the factory who produces the item, which ultimately goes to the customer. And that's managing customer orders. That's how the customer order is moved through the system, from customers to factory to be made in the factory, which of course affects the staff in the factory, who will create employment for people working in the factory. It'll create employment for the people who make the machines that the factory uses as well. So there are what's known as multiplier effects coming off that. And that's the way the order system runs. It's quite a sophisticated process in practice, but when we draw it on paper like this, or on a slide as I have done here, it looks quite straightforward. If you just follow the arrows, you get back to the customer who placed the order. But that's managing customer orders, and that's all we're going to deal with here. So let's leave it at that. This is quite a short class, so leave it at that and say thank you for watching.